Good morning, and thank you for the beautiful music that allows us to come together wherever we are, that allows us to be grounded and centered, and to allow ourselves to be fully present. What a joy it is to have beautiful musicians and extraordinary music. My name is Reverend Dr. David Golberg, and it is a joy to be with you however we are connecting through whatever format today. What I know is the one power, the one presence is exactly where you are. So we love our sanctuary, we love our building, and we know that our community is so much more than bricks and mortar. Thank you for being with us. So as we get started in our new order of service, we do like to remind you of the different ways that you can give to Unity on the Avenue and support the work that we're doing, because we know that at the end, it's probably time for another cup of coffee or another plate of pancakes. So for those of you who continue to give in all of the forms that you do, thank you so much. And I do remind you that we always welcome your checks. You can visit us at unityontheavenue.org and click donate. And you can also use the mobile app or text to give. And if you have another way that you prefer to give, we're absolutely willing to accept prosperity and abundance in all of its forms. So thank you for that. And please join me now as we bless your gifts, your tithes, and your offerings. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is. And please now also join me in our statement of faith. This is who we are as a community. This is where we stand. This is our guiding principle. This is our guiding light. Please, wherever you are, there is only one power and one presence in the universe and in my life. God, the good, omnipotent. So breathe that in. That is who we are. That is what we believe. That is what we stand for. And that is what guides us in all we do, in all we share, in all of our interactions. So if that resonates with you, we welcome you as a member of this community, whatever that looks like for you, however you choose and want to join us.
This is a brand new song, hot off the presses, called Breathe in Freedom.
Breathe it in and out, the air of freedom. Speak the words out loud or sing a song. Let the bells ring out the truth of who we really are. Our human right to breathe the air of freedom. The air of freedom. Breathe them in and out, our prayers of freedom. Speak the words of truth and sing along. Honor what you want and may it bring you peace. Our human right to pray our prayers in freedom. Our prayers in freedom. Every woman, every man, and every child on earth, know the truth inside your heart and breathe. On our knees or on our feet, to worship as we please. Our human right to breathe and and pray in freedom. Our human right to pray and breathe in freedom. Breathe in freedom. Breathe in freedom. Breathe in.
Oh my goodness, are we so blessed. Thank you for that beautiful original song, Pamela. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mailyn, for backup vocals. What an amazing music ministry we have here at Unity on the Avenue. And we are so blessed to be able to communicate with so many in so many ways. So my talk today is the second in a two-part series that we launched last week on the 4 freedoms. And for those of you who were with us, I shared that President Franklin Roosevelt shared what he termed the 4 freedoms in his State of the Union address in January 1941. Now, contextually, he was preparing the country for war because, of course, it was later that year in December that we experienced Pearl Harbor. So FDR was trying to prepare the American people for what he saw coming as the leader of the free world at that time. And so what we spoke to last week was not only the freedoms, but also the responsibilities that come with those freedoms. So when we spoke about freedom from want, we also spoke of the responsibility of being in service. And when we spoke about freedom from fear, we spoke about the responsibility to take action. So we spoke of freedom from last week. This week we're going to be jumping into freedom of worship and freedom of speech, as well as the correlating responsibilities. So the other piece that I shared last week is that in thinking about and meditating on the talks, what I came to realize, in my humble personal opinion, is that many, if not all, of the circumstances that we're working through today fill in the blank, whatever is the top of your list, whatever is in the news, whatever is being protested, whatever is being debated on the political stage. Virtually all of the energy around those topics and those issues stems from some form of inequality. So let us be with that then as we continue to unpack freedom of speech and freedom of worship. So freedom of speech, it is something we talk about a lot. Indeed, it is the First Amendment to our United States Constitution. Our founders knew that they wanted to be even more clear about those freedoms and what they looked like and what their intention was. So the other piece that we discussed then as part of FDR's effort to engage the American people is that Norman Rockwell also joined the effort and created a series of 4 paintings with the same titles. So today we look at freedom of speech and freedom to worship. So when we look at freedom of speech, it is indeed a basic tenet on which our country was built. And after the founders crafted the Declaration of Independence, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution speaks to freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, some of you may remember to a history class or a civics class that actually 10 amendments were added at the same time. And those first 10 amendments are what we refer to as the Bill of Rights. And again, the first point that we talk about is freedom of speech. It was ratified in 1791. And what a powerful amendment that is. It speaks to speech, it speaks to religion, it speaks to the right to gather and to come together. And 70 years later, in a public address, Frederick Douglass offered in his talk a plea for free speech in Boston. Liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. So we are constantly talking about and thinking about that right of free speech in every era in so many different forms. You know, it is that free speech that has been referred to as the great moral renovator of society and government, because that is how we're able to affect change, by speaking, by communicating, by recognizing that we have differences, by listening to differences of opinion, and perhaps, just perhaps, maybe changing our mind. So when I heard that term, the great moral renovator, I flashed to current day. And we enjoy HDTV. And if you're familiar with the network, there are a lot of home renovation shows. And what does that look like when there's a challenge with an existing property or an existing construct? Maybe they do foundation work. Maybe there's been water damage or some other kind of damage that needs to be fixed, that needs to be shored up. Maybe there's a wall that needs to be built. Maybe there's a door that needs to be put in a wall. Maybe the roof needs to be removed and we need to expand into a second story. So whatever that renovation is, for us as Americans, that process starts with free speech. And again, we have so many more tools now, of course, with technology than FDR did in 1941. Technology is good and bad. We all know that everything is on an energetic spectrum and that there is the positive and the shadow side. And the shadow side of technology is that 2 in 5 Americans, according to Pew Research, have reported that they have been harassed online. And another worrisome statistic, more than half of young women have reported receiving a graphic picture or text message that was unwanted and unsolicited. So while we embrace technology and we know it supports us in our efforts, we need to be forever vigilant about what that looks like and how we use it and how we tap into it for the higher and greater good of all. You know, the other thing that we know is Anonymous, right? Anonymous has said and written some wonderful things, and Anonymous has said and written some hurtful, hateful, dark things. So when we have that ability to be anonymous, we also need to accept the responsibility that it still is representative of who we are and the essence and the energy of what we're bringing to the planet. And so the other part of the conversation then is, when does free speech become hate speech? What if I am recognizing my freedom of speech and somewhere, somehow, it is infringing upon someone else's rights? Then I may or may not be aware of that. Again, an ongoing part of the conversation that we need to be ever aware of. You know, for those who have studied rhetoric, or anybody who has had a junior high or high school debate class, there is a reason why we were invited to learn both sides of an issue, and then we didn't know what side we would actually be arguing, the pro or the con, until we stepped into the room. What if we took that same approach to some of our issues today? I honor and respect the keen minds and the huge hearts that are engaged in all of these issues. And what if we, in recognition of our free speech, also tried to learn what we could about the other side of the issue. Now, just because I engage in possibly changing my perspective does not mean I have to completely change my point of view. One certainly can, and that has happened, and there are examples throughout time. More recently, within some of our communities, with names that people might be familiar with, Doreen Virtue spent a lot of time creating angel cards and teaching people how to read angel cards and supporting people in so many different ways in that realm. And as she expanded her horizons and as she gained new information, she chose to move from that place of consciousness into Christianity and has become a conservative Christian. And we bless her in that expression. We know that whatever she is doing is perfect for her. And conversely, Reverend Carlton Pearson, who has been described as Oral Roberts' black son, was with Oral Roberts as he built his extraordinary ministry, created his university, did so much good work in the world until Carlton gained new information, had an epiphany of his own, and he moved from the realm of Oral Roberts in Christianity and is now doing excellent work in New Thought. So you see, when we gain new information, we have the ability to shift and to change and to grow and to move. We don't have to, but we certainly can. So what does that look like then? What is the responsibility that comes with freedom to speak or freedom of speech? Well, for freedom of speech to work, we all have the responsibility to listen. So what is a minister without a congregation to listen? What is a court of law without a jury of one's peers to hear the evidence, the pro and the con, and to interpret and see what they can find as part of our judicial system and our jury system? And what are elected officials if they are not in constant communication with those who elect them to office and those who pay their salaries through our tax dollars? So you see, yes, we absolutely have freedom of speech, and we have a responsibility to listen. You know, I love a quote from a French politician who said, "Where are the people? I must follow them, for I am their leader." So leaders are not always out ahead of the parade. Sometimes leaders are in the midst of it all, in the mix. Sometimes leaders are behind. Sometimes leaders take a pause. So wherever you are on your journey, I invite you into the spiritual practice of listening. You know, when I teach workshops on listening, I do the game that many of us played in the schoolyard and when we were much younger, some in kindergarten, some in preschool, where we get a line of 10 kids times 2, right? So 10 here and 10 here. And we whisper one thing to the first person at the beginning of each line, and we tell everybody to please try to pay attention and don't intentionally make an error. And it's fascinating what we get at the end of those 10 people passing a message along. So, what does that look like for you? What does that feel like for you? Because you deserve to be heard. The people who are representing Black Lives Matter deserve to be heard. The people who are supporting the Me Too movement deserve to be heard. The people who continue to support marriage equality deserve to be heard. People whose ideas are different from yours, people who push your buttons, people who make you feel scratchy deserve to be heard. Now, it was a 23-year-old John Lewis who spoke to the vast crowd at the 1963 March on Washington just before Martin Luther King Jr., in which he vowed, by the forces of our demands, our determination, and our numbers, we shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them back together in an image of God and democracy. His brilliant speech was almost immediately and forever overshadowed by Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. As a child, Representative Lewis wanted to be a minister, and he actually practiced talking to his family's chickens. For those of you who have been to our beautiful campus here at Unity on the Avenue, you know that our delightful next door neighbors have a chicken coop that butts right up against our property. So for any of you budding ministers, if you want to practice your talks on chickens, come on over. We love you and support you in that experience. You know, I was also reminded of a conversation between Representative John Lewis and the late, great Gwen Ifill. Gwen Ifill recounts that she was with Representative Lewis in Selma on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And she really wanted to know what was on his mind and what was on his heart on that amazing, powerful, powerful day. And so Gwen did what Gwen Ifill did so well. She asked a few beautifully placed and well-worded questions, and John Lewis just took it and ran with it. And she recounts how several hours later, they were both laughing through their tears. So we honor Gwen Ifill, we honor John Lewis, who died on Friday, July 17th, at 80 years old from pancreatic cancer. In remembering the civil rights icon, the Speaker of the House honored Lewis by quoting him, "In the face of injustice, make good trouble, necessary trouble." John Lewis was 80 years old, and he left an indelible mark on our country and on our freedom of speech. And my friends, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We've all heard the old adage. And my invitation this day for myself and for all of us is to move into that space of being present and listening twice as much as we speak. So from freedom of speech, we move to freedom of belief or freedom of worship, and the corresponding responsibility to accept. And I want to share with you the story of Anne Hutchinson. Anne Hutchinson was a woman in the 1600s. She and her husband followed a man by the name of Reverend John Cotton. And Reverend Cotton was preaching the relatively new thought at the time that it really wasn't what we did to win God's grace, right? It wasn't what we did, but rather we received God's grace just by being who we are. What an amazing concept for the 1600s. So Anne Hutchinson and her husband had 15 pregnancies. And she had 12 children that lived to adulthood. And she and her husband and 11 of those children, one was already grown and actually went with Reverend Cotton to the New World, to the Massachusetts colony. And so Anne and her husband and 11 children made that voyage on the same ship exactly 1 year later. And as history would have it, when they landed in the colony, Anne started offering her support to Reverend Cotton and what she believed and what she thought. She created a rather large women's group. Then men started wanting to attend, including the governor of the Massachusetts colony, who was a like-minded spirit. Well, she soon got crossways with the church of the day. She was put on trial for heresy. She was abandoned by her mentor, and she was excommunicated from the colony. Now, I'm not exactly sure how church and state were working in that day. I did not know it was possible to be excommunicated from a colony. Nonetheless, that was Anne Hutchinson's experience with her husband and 11 children. She chose to go to the Rhode Island colony, which she thought might be more reasonable for her and the work that she wanted to do. But then it became clear that Massachusetts may be overtaking Rhode Island, and so she moved to what was then New Amsterdam, what we know as New York. And I share this just by way of these following facts. This is Anne Hutchinson's family lineage. From those 15 children who survived, there are 3 United States presidents. There are 3 United States presidential aspirants. There are 2 governors of different states. There's a Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and a president of Harvard. And this is all because one person stood in her truth. And with regard to her freedom of belief, she knew what was right for her and for her family. So we honor that in her, and we honor that in all people. It is because one person sought the freedom to believe. And guess what? In those early days, Pennsylvania was settled by the Quakers. Maryland was settled by Catholics. New York and New England were settled by Shakers and evangelicals. And Rhode Island was settled primarily by Jewish families. So even in those very early days of our country, we had religious diversity. We had ethnic diversity. We had economic diversity. We had social diversity because white men, not all white men, were even allowed to vote, depending on property, depending on wealth. So these are issues that we continue to work with and work through. And that diversity was on the heart and in the mind of Thomas Jefferson, who, of course, wrote the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson also wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, a bill establishing religious freedom in all of its forms. And that was his way of looking for the golden thread. That was his way of saying, we all came here to escape religious persecution, therefore we should not codify religious persecution within our country or within our individual colonies. And I also found it fascinating that Jefferson, being an architect at heart, not only created his memorial, he created the wording that was to be inscribed, where it says, "Here lies buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. Because of these as testimonials that I have lived, I wish to be most remembered." Okay, so here's a quiz for you. What is something that perhaps many, if not all of us, would include in that short memorial, in that short biography? Maybe that he was the 3rd president of the United States? And for him, it didn't rate in his top 3. He was more concerned about the Declaration of Independence, the Bill for Religious Freedom, and founding a university. So what we know then, even from our roots, we are a great and tremendous and amazing nation with so many varied backgrounds, beliefs, geographies, with the intention that we are all created equal. And what we know is that has expressed differently over the decades, over the centuries, over the time that we continue to grow and expand as a country. What we know is much has been done, and there is still much left to do. We also know that the work isn't easy and that it's far from finished. So wherever you are on your journey, I love you, I bless you, I honor you in your expression. And please join us in conversation. Join us as we choose to raise the energy, to raise the frequency on the planet by engaging in these challenging conversations with love and with respect for all involved. You know, talk about that dichotomy. I'm reminded of the mighty woman with the torch, the mother of liberty, the mother of exiles. On the base of the Statue of Liberty is printed, "Give me your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to be free." On one amazing monument, we are making that statement to the world. And how do we do that in application? There's been so much good that has come from people coming to this country. And there has been the shadow, there has been what we might call bad, there has been the dark. Therein, my friends, lies our work. We don't get to disengage. As I shared last week, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. So choose to engage wherever your mind is, wherever your heart is. Join us in this work. And so what we know with that freedom of belief then comes the responsibility to accept. And let's be clear, when we're talking about the responsibility to accept, we are talking about the responsibility to accept our differences. We're not asking anybody to be exactly like we are. We are vast and we have as many different ideologies and beliefs and races and people and cultures as there are almost people on the planet. So what we step into then, what the invitation is for us to accept our differences. Our differences are real. And I love the image of our country as a mosaic rather than, in my opinion, the outdated metaphor of a melting pot. Because in a melting pot, everything kind of melts and becomes an interesting gray or black or beige or. But in a mosaic, each piece retains its beautiful identity, its amazing background and color and heritage and how it came to be, and then becomes part of a greater expression. So let's embrace that great mosaic of our perspectives, of our grievances, of inequality, of pain, of joy. Let us come together and share those experiences. And last week I shared part of a quote from Martin Luther King that said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality." Well, the rest of that quote is, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny." I love that. And that, of course, was Letter from a Birmingham Jail. So what we know right now is that we are fractured and fragmented. We are beautiful and we are perfect and we are imperfect. Our work brings us together. America is the longest lasting pluralistic democracy in the world. Again, it's sloppy, it's messy, it's interesting, it's complicated, it's complex, it's beautiful, it's majestic, and it's the best system we have at this moment. So join us in engaging your freedom of speech and your freedom of worship. The intention of our founders and many of us today is to be more accepting, more open, more loving, and more just. So let us recognize, embrace, and celebrate our differences with how we speak, with how we come together to worship, whatever that looks like, or for those who choose not to worship. They too are part of the one. There is no one and nothing outside of that. It is indeed our acceptance and our empathy that binds us together. And finally, I share with you this quote by James Baldwin, who said, "I know what I am asking is impossible, but in our time, as in every time, the impossible is the least one can demand." So let us strive to make the impossible possible and to make the imperfect perfect. Please join me in prayer. So I just allow myself to continue to feel into the positive energy vortex that has been created with this beautiful community today. And I find myself in a place of tremendous gratitude and extraordinary thanksgiving. And I just say, thank you, Spirit. Thank you for the ability to come together, to connect in community, to be a part of that one heart, that one mind that we know is in, around, and through all sentient beings. And I stand in the truth that in this community, we support freedom of worship in all of its forms. We honor the divine in all. We recognize all faith traditions and those not on a faith path, for we know that the divine lives within each and every being. And we stand for freedom of speech, recognizing that with our freedom comes responsibility. So we are just open. We are absolutely grounded in principle and open at the top to whatever that looks like, however that unfolds. Because what we know as metaphysicians is that one power, that one presence is in, around, and through. Again, it is in, around, and through. There was no way that no one or anything can be outside of that one power and that one presence. So however individuals choose to show up, we live the concept of namaste, and we recognize the divinity in all. The divinity in me blesses and recognizes the divinity in you. So as we go forth on this day, in the coming days, in the coming weeks, we just stand in our truth, we stand in our power, that the one power, the one presence that I choose to call God, created every being. And we bless them and honor them, especially when they show up in interesting ways. For we are a community of love. We step forth in love, we show up in love, and we know that it all starts within. So we are grounded in self-love that we can take to the rest of the community, to the rest of the world, indeed, doing our part to create and support a world that works for all. So I release this word into the magnificence that is the law, knowing that it was done before it was uttered, before it was spoken. And I bless every being calling in the highest and best in every aspect of their lives, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, professional. It is all good because it is all God. So I just allow it to be, recognizing that the one power, the one presence, always has my back and is always conspiring for my good, regardless of what it might look like to my human eyes. So I release, I allow it to be, I lean into the good, and I stand in the truth that God is magnificent, and so is each individual that is co-creating in a human expression. Thank you, Spirit. All is well, and so it is. Amen.
This ain't coming from no prophet. I'm an extraordinary woman. When I close my eyes, I see the way this world could be when we all walk hand in hand. child cries for a crust of bread, when the last man dies for just words that he said, when the shelter over the poor is dead, we shall be free. When it's good that we notice the color of skin, but the first thing we look for is the beauty within. When the skies and the oceans are clean again, we shall be free. Oh, we shall be free. We shall be free. Stand tall, walk proud, 'cause we shall be free. When we're free to love anyone we choose, when the world's big enough for all different views, when we all can worship from our own kind of view, we shall be free. Oh, we shall be free. We shall be free. Have a little faith, walk tall, we shall be free. And when money talks for the very last time, and nobody walks or stands